you all know where you are. This is the master class, and this is what Nancy Davis curates. And today we have Bob Roth, and the topic is meditation in the age of anxiety. So welcome, Bob, and welcome to everyone. And I always do just a little personal introduction, and then I turn it right over to Nancy, who will do the more formal introduction of you, Bob. And you can finish sharing. Thank you, Wendy. I just want to say that Bob and I met many years ago. I don't know if you remember where we met, but I remember the first time I met you was in Aspen at, I think it was Glenda Greenwald's house at with an Aspen Brain meeting. And you spoke about transcendental meditation, about meditation. And I went up to you afterwards, and I was a little nervous because I know you were, you know, you work with celebrities and you're a big guru of the person in the world who really motivates so many people about meditation. And I personally had been struggling with meditation. And I had never, you know, other kinds of classes, and I just never ended up with a practice. And you convinced me that I should take a class, a TM class, which I did. And that changed everything because it was easy, and it was, and I understood from you especially why and how important it is. And then the last thing I just want to mention, and maybe Nancy, you're going to mention this too, but I think it's important for people to realize that Bob works with so many celebrities. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld and Gwyneth Paltrow and Katy Perry, they have talked about working with Bob Roth, and that he has taught them or helps them with their meditation, and that it has made such a difference. So I just think we're really very lucky to have him with us this morning. So Bob, thank you for doing this, getting up early. And now over to Nancy with a more formal introduction.
Thank you, Susie. I appreciate that. Before I get into the introduction of Bob, I'll do my usual quick Zoom instructions. For those of you who've been on calls, you'll recognize this. I'll do it quickly. Wendy's muted everybody, and we're going to stay that way. With a group this size, we have to eliminate all the background noise that comes from unmuting. If there are two ways you can view this call, one is at top right of your Zoom window. If you choose the gallery view, you'll see this beautiful mosaic of faces. But when Bob is speaking, and he is going to talk a little bit at first, I urge you to use the speaker view, and that will make Bob more prominent on your screen. There are a lot of people on the call today, so they're center right of your Zoom window, there's a blue arrow. Right now I've got 10 pages in my Zoom. So if you click on that arrow, you can scroll through and see all of your friends and colleagues who are on the call. Bottom center of the Zoom window, there is a chat icon. Most of you know this now. If you click that, it opens a window to your right. That's where we'd love you to not only say hello, but also post questions for Bob. Throughout the call, Susie and I will be eyeing that and aggregating those and bringing them to Bob. We're going to leave plenty of room for questions because I know you're going to have plenty. Alas, Zoom has also placed a bright green share screen button right next to chat, and I'm going to ask you to be careful not to accidentally click that because that's very, very distracting. Many of you ask in the chat, so I'll tell you now, this is being recorded and it will be shared on our website, usually within a day, because lots of people like to send it to friends, and we find that many, many people look at this after. Bob Roth, such a pleasure to have him here today. He is the CEO of the David Lynch Foundation, and he's taught transcendental meditation for nearly 50 years. Bringing TM to more than 1 million students in underserved schools in 35 countries, to military veterans and their families who suffer from post-traumatic stress, and to women and children who are survivors of domestic violence. He also directs the Center for Health and Wellness, which is bringing meditation to Fortune 100 companies, government agencies, and nonprofits. He's the host of iHeartRadio podcast, Stay Calm. I'll bet lots of people are tuning in now. And on his Sirius XM radio show, Success Without Stress. Bob sits down on that show with prominent meditators to discuss their practices and influence of TM on their lives. He's spoken about the science of meditation all over the world, and proud to say at the Global Wellness Summit in Italy. As Susie mentioned, he counts numerous celebrities as clients, including Oprah Winfrey, Tom Hanks, Hugh Jackman, Gwyneth Paltrow. But in our world, Bob is the celebrity. And you will, if you don't already know him and know about him, you will know that by the time this call is over. He is also an author, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's Transcendental Meditation, and the 2018 New York Times bestseller, Strength in Stillness, The Power of Transcendental Meditation, a book that really changed the way I look at things. Bob is going to tell us a bit about the meditation landscape, and then we'll get to your questions, and of course, the particular challenge of this unusual time in the world. The man who gave me my mantra, Bob Roth.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Susie. You can hear me okay? It's okay. So I just have to say, Susie and Nancy and everybody, the feeling I have now is the same feeling when I joined you all in Italy, when I get to be with all of you. It's such a sweet, warm, happy, loving feeling. I just, you know, you can name all those quote unquote famous people. I'd much rather spend the time with you guys. It's like family. So I'm very, very grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you, and in such a comfortable situation. I have to start by saying that I have been teaching Transcendental Meditation for almost 50 years. And I started at the age of 65, so you can see the impact. Kidding. But I am by nature not what you might think a meditation teacher would be like. I really love science. I love big ideas. I love moonshots. I love big ideas, but I like them to be anchored in real. So I love science. I love data. I've been called a skeptic, and I embrace that. I think that that's healthy, particularly when we're talking about something like meditation. So what I want to do is I'd like to take 10 minutes or so and just define some terms about what do we mean when we talk about meditation, and are all meditations the same, and how do I do them? And then, as you said, open for questions, and then I guess Nancy and I, who's a wonderful person, and Susie, you're a wonderful person, will take questions, and then we'll have a conversation. I do think it's interesting right now, because when I learned to meditate and when I started teaching this, you didn't want to say the word meditation in sort of polite company. It was just too weird. Just the word meditation was just too weird. And now, as you heard from Nancy, we're offering this on military bases, in hospitals, in public schools, in companies, businesses, in homeless shelters, everywhere. Why? What's going on? What happened? I think that it's a perfect storm of three things. I think number one, stress and anxiety is, the age of anxiety is worse now, and it got really bad starting around March or April. So stress is worse than ever. Anxiety is worse than ever. We also know the devastating impacts of stress on our body and brain. When my father was a World War II veteran, and he suffered terrible PTSD in combat, and they just dismissed it. They said, "Oh, that's just battle fatigue," or you have your bell rang. They say that in football when you get a bad concussion. It was just diminished. The problem with stress is worse than ever. Number two, there's no drug. Pharmaceutical companies haven't come up with a medicine that we can take that we can prevent stress or trauma or actually heal it, or we can give our child in order to handle all the pressures and weird stresses that are going on today. Yeah, we self-medicate and we manage it with coffee and alcohol, wine and antidepressant and antihypertensive medications, but it doesn't get to, I like to call it the tumor of stress that's inside us that's sort of metastasizing. And the third reason why there's so much interest is science. No doubt about it. There's so much scientific research today that you can't dismiss the word meditation. You could say, I'm skeptical whether I could do it, but you can't be skeptical that meditation produces an effect. So what do we mean by meditation? So that's what I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about the three basic types, and then we'll get into transcendental meditation and all that stuff later. The analogy I like to use, and I know that Nancy and Susie have heard this a million times, but the analogy I like to use is you're on a little boat and you're in the middle of the ocean. there's no pandemic. You're in the middle of the ocean. And all of a sudden you get these giant 30, 40, 50-foot high waves. And you could think, oh my God, the whole ocean is in upheaval. Whole ocean is a bit of an exaggeration, because if we did a cross section of the ocean out there, we'd realize that you may have 40-foot high waves, 3 stories high, big waves on the surface, but the ocean is miles deep. And while the nature of the ocean may be turbulent on the surface, the nature of the ocean at its depth is pretty darn silent. And we use that as a wonderful analogy for the mind. Surface of the mind, like the waves, tsunami waves. Some people call it the monkey mind. I like to call it the gotta mind. As in, I gotta do this and I gotta do that, and I gotta call him and I gotta call her, and I gotta make a list. Then I gotta find the list. Then I gotta make a new list. And I gotta slow down, but I gotta get going, and I gotta get to sleep, and I gotta get up. Anybody? Not? And sometimes you get up in the middle, you gotta get to sleep, and you get it because you gotta get up to go to the bathroom, and then you can't, the gotta mind doesn't let you go back to sleep. So it's a natural human desire to say, I'd like some inner calm, I'd like some inner clarity, I'd like a sense of inner connectedness, I'd like a sense of inner equanimity, inner strength, centeredness with all the crazy. And the operative word there is inner. And the question is there such a thing as an inner? And if so, how do we get there? And enter the realm of meditation. Thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, people have been talking about meditation. And in ancient times, when it was sort of more legit at the time, it was associated with a powerful mind, a calm mind, a creative mind, a blissful mind, an insightful mind. And then over the years, more recently, it got sort of wrapped up in all sorts of stuff. And then we started diminishing it. No, it's crazy and it's a sect and it's just nonsense and, you know, nothing could come from it. But then science came along in early 1970s with some research on transcendental meditation done at Harvard and UCLA Medical School and found significant effects. So before I get into that, then what happened was, then all the scientists said, yeah, meditation's good. It doesn't matter what you do, it's all good. Just do something for 20 minutes. You could ride a horse, you could walk your dog, you could listen to classical music, you could knit, crochet, you could do anything, just 20 minutes. Well, it turns out that's not the case. And it turns out, according to brain research, and this is all leading up to this comment, it turns out, according to brain research, with all the meditations that are out there, apps, Headspace, Muse, Calm, Mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, Zen meditation, all those meditations out there fall into 3 basic categories. And they know this because of brain research. And they know this because brain researchers tell us that every distinct, discrete experience we have affects our brain in a discrete, distinct way. So if you listen to classical music, it has one effect on your brain. If you listen to heavy metal music, it has another effect. If you watch a romantic comedy, it has one effect on your brain. If you watch a horror film, it has another effect on the brain. So they got all these people do all these meditations and they hooked them up and they found out, as I said, 3 basic types. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain those 3 types and then we're going to take questions. Okay? Everybody with me? Got it? First type, and maybe some of you are familiar with, I know so many of us have tried different types of meditation. First type, called focused attention. Focused attention, the perspective on focused attention is, if you want to have a calm ocean, what disrupts a calm ocean? Waves. So stop the waves, you have a calm ocean. If you want to have a calm mind, what disrupts a calm mind? Thoughts. So stop thoughts and then you'll have a calm mind. You'll have equanimity. And for that, there are many types of meditation that ask you to clear your mind of thoughts, focus on your breath, focus on a part of your body, focus on an idea, but concentrate, stop the mind from wandering. They call it a monkey mind. When we do that type of meditation, it creates something called gamma brainwaves. Gamma brainwaves are 20 to 50 cycles per second or more. That's when your brain is working very hard and it's tiring. Back in the days when we had to study for an exam or something like that, or now when we're just writing a book or writing something and we're just doing nothing other than just concentrating all day, we're exhausted because we burn up a lot of energy just concentrating. So that's the first type, focused attention. Second type of meditation is called open monitoring. Open monitoring has a different approach. Open monitoring says thoughts themselves are not necessarily the disruptor of calm, but the content of thoughts can be the disruptor of calm. Now, in open monitoring, that includes many mindfulness techniques. Content of thoughts can be the disruptor of calm. So you could have a thought about a guy named Joe, and if you don't know anybody named Joe, or then it's like, eh. But if you have a thought about a guy named Joe, and 10 years ago, Joe done you wrong, if your name is Joe, then we're talking about a different Joe. So just, it's not a self-referral Joe, but Joe done you wrong, then what happens? Now I'm upset. Joe, he did that. Now, what open monitoring does, among other things, is it teaches us to dispassionately observe our thoughts, our moods, our feelings, even our behaviors. So we live in the present, now. Now is not 10 years ago when that hurt or that trauma happened. I'm living now. I'm not worried about the past or the future, in the present. When I do that open monitoring, it creates something called theta brainwaves. Theta are 4 to 8 cycles per second. It can be either onset of dream, but largely it is when you're sitting quietly thinking deeply about something. You know, in the old days when you could go into a library and you'd see someone over on the corner and they weren't doing anything, but you could say, oh, I don't want to disturb that person. They're thinking deeply. Now, another person in the other corner could be daydreaming and you don't mind disturbing them. There's no quiet, but there's like a quiet around someone. You don't want to disturb them. So that's theta brainwaves. There's other types of signatures, but that's the main one. These two, is this all clear so far? You're still awake? I've been told my voice can put people to sleep. So in an instant, I'd actually am disallowed from giving introductory talks in New York City after 8 o'clock because everyone just falls asleep. But anyway, you're still awake, some of you. These two approaches, focused attention and open monitoring, are called cognitive approaches to meditation. Cognitive means pertaining to your thoughts, your moods, your feelings, and behavior. Pertaining to the waves, adapting to the waves, a different attitude towards the waves, a different color to the waves, guided meditation, different thoughts, replacing bad thoughts with good thoughts. Fine, these two are legitimate approaches to meditation. I am not passing judgment here, just different outcomes. The third type is called self-transcending, and that's transcendental meditation. Self-transcending has a completely different perspective. Self-transcending, going back to that ocean analogy, self-transcending says, yes, there are waves on the surface of the ocean by its nature, but by its nature, the ocean is pretty darn silent at its depth. So in self-transcending, we have a parallel. We say, yes, my mind is active, moods, feelings, thoughts, upset, all this stuff that I was just talking about. But the hypothesis is, deep within every human being, every one of us, you don't have to believe it, that's the hypothesis, deep within every one of us right now, and that includes your rascally kids, right now, there's a level where the mind is already settled and peaceful and quiet and alert. It's already there. We've lost access to it. Now, that's not such a far stretch because we already know there's a vertical dimension to our mind. We love deeply. We hurt deeply. We have an intuition. You ever have the experience of someone, Susie, coming to you with some idea for global wellness and it sounds like perfectly great up here, and then you have a few minutes of quiet reflection and your intuition, you go, I don't think so. We've all had that. Quiet, vertical. So the hypothesis is deeper than that is a level where the mind is completely settled and awake. And transcendental meditation gives access, effortless access to that. Anyone can access it. Not a test of wills. 10-year-old kids with ADD can do this. And how do we know what I just said isn't just a bunch of hooey about, I haven't used the word hooey in a long time, but just a bunch of hooey? That, oh, Bob is here and he's talking about some calm within the mind, and wow, wouldn't that be? But how, you know, maybe it's just hype. How do we know? Science. Because we know, as you guys know better than anybody in the world, there's mind and body are not just connected, they're one. And if during this self-transcending, we're accessing this calm, quiet level that's very familiar, it's our own inner nature, it's not something else, just very familiar, and yet unique, somehow unique, that quiet level, it must show up in a constellation of changes in the way the brain and nervous system function. So I'm just going to mention one or two, then I'm going to turn this over to the next part of our discussion. Here's a few things. Research, as I mentioned, at Harvard Medical School back in 1969 and 70, found that during the 20 minutes of TM, your body gained a state of rest as measured by oxygen consumption, deeper than the deepest part of deep sleep. It doesn't take the place of sleep. It's a different mechanism, deeper than the deepest part of deep sleep. And why is that significant? You've all heard of cortisol? Of course, this is a talk about meditation in the age of anxiety. Well, meditation in the age of floods of cortisol. Cortisol is secreted by the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys. Cortisol is called the stress hormone. We need some cortisol to get through the day, but we are bottling it these days. And it's dangerous. It is dangerous. It is toxic. It undermines digestion. It weakens the immune system terribly. That's a whole nother, I almost went off on a whole talk about inflammation and cortisol, but I'll just leave it at this. And it also floods the hippocampus, which is your memory and learning center. So when you're under stress, you can't remember. You have a child who's very sensitive and studies hard for an exam, and then the exam comes, she or he gets nervous, can't remember anything. He studied cortisol in the hippocampus. A good night's sleep will reduce cortisol, although it fluctuates, reduce cortisol by 10% during 20 minutes of TM. Published research shows it reduces it by 30 to 40% every time. And the last thing I'll say, it calms the amygdala, which is your fight or flight center in the brain. It brings the prefrontal cortex back online, which is the CEO of the brain, which is the grown-up brain, which is the part of the rational filter against impulsive decisions, and also wakes up the creative networks within the brain. So, is one technique better than the other? Different outcomes, completely. I'm a big believer in yes and rather than either or. I'm a big believer in equipping our toolbox with effective, accessible tools that we can use to navigate this age of anxiety that ain't getting any less. So I went on a little bit longer, Nancy, sorry. But
you can, it's fine. It was wonderful. It feels like a refresher course too. I think for those of us who practice, that's what it feels like. And it's, incredible information. And I have to say the question top of mind, I think for most of us, is with what is happening in the world today and what has been happening these many, many months, and people looking for ways to deal with what has happened, and the mental health crisis that has resulted from COVID-19, from isolation and stresses, emotional, financial, you name it. What role can meditation play in that for real? What can people do that can manage? I mean, it is at epic proportions. People talk all the time about stress and anxiety is related to this. What's your take on what's going on in the world and what can be done? I'm sure your clients come to you and, things are very exaggerated these days.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is so much of health, and you, again, I'm talking to, you guys all know this, so much of health, what we do for health is done from the neck down. What am I eating? What supplements am I taking? Am I on a plant-based diet, or this diet, a paleo diet? It's from the neck down. Exercises I'm doing, yoga that I'm doing. So this is a 3.3 pound organ that pretty much runs everything. I know there's the brain-gut axis, and I know there's all these other things, but it pretty much runs everything. And I look at meditation, evidence-based meditation, as attending to this. And I think that these days, I think one of the most significant outcomes is going to be the recognition of the need that meditation is not just some luxury, that's for other people who have the time. I certainly don't have the time. I'm busy. I got family. I got all this stuff I have to do. I don't have the time for that. I think that illusion is just going to have to drop off. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. We're just going to have to allocate time for this, like we allocate time for eating and we allocate time for exercising. And what we'll find is by allocating time for this on a regular basis, we're far more efficient in our day. We're far less distracted. Stress, amygdala, it just shuts down judgment, planning, decision-making, sense of self. It shuts down problem solving. That's all up in here. And so we know those days when we're stressed, I don't have time to exercise, I don't have time to meditate. Meanwhile, we don't know where we put the keys, and then we found the keys, and then we don't know where we're supposed to be going, or it's just so much time is wasted. Or, we're on to that fourth glass of wine to calm ourselves down in hopes that we're going to sleep better. Or we're staying up late trying to just, chill, watching television or playing on the computer, which of course has blue light, which of course suppresses melatonin, so I can't sleep. So I'm saying all of this is, Nancy, is what's happening is the demand for meditation, the need and the demand and urgency for that. And so my final comment on this would be, I think personally, one of the most important things that's coming now is, and I know we shouldn't have to wait for it, but is the science behind it, because there's so many people jumping onto a bandwagon and using marketing and branding and this and all these claims. And it annoys me because you don't have to do TM, do whatever you want to do, but do it if, know that it's doing something for you. Because we're now coming, it used to be in the old days, people would come to, I'm a little bit stressed, I'm a little concerned about my husband, they're crankier than usual or something like that. But now it's serious issues that require serious approaches. And so meditation is going to be central. Can I say one more thing before I turn over? So here's an interesting thing. So I was talking to this woman who was a vice president, two women, one was a vice president of Yale, the other was for student affairs, this is 2 years ago, vice president at NYU, New York University. And they were coming to me because they were wanting advice. Colleges were, and if you have any college kids or you remember college, very stressful time. Very stressful time. And it used to be on college campuses that you would go, okay, you're stressed, well then go over, and if you're really having troubles, then go across campus and go talk to a guidance counselor and maybe sit in on a yoga class or sit in on a mindfulness class, sort it out, and then come back and go back to work, be serious. Well, now they're saying that ain't working. Now they're talking about giving kids, when they come to college, the primary course, which they're going to have, a peak performance course, which they're going to have throughout their college years, and you know what, throughout their life, of information on correct meditation, exercise, diet, etc. This becomes central to their learning experience, because everything they're learning is going to change in a year or two anyway. It's going to become outdated. What are we doing to tune up the brain? What are we doing to tune up these creativity centers? That was a very long answer, Nancy, and I apologize. But that's the point. It's inevitable. It's coming because it's the antidote. Just another glass of wine. We love wine. It's fine. Another cup of coffee, no problem. But it doesn't get to the core problem that we have.
Okay, fantastic, and thank you for that. There are a tremendous amount of questions in the chat about children.
Short answers.
Pardon?
Watch this. Short.
Doesn't have to be short. One thing I just want to mention in the chat, people sometimes ask for recommendations. Is there a, is there a website? Is there a book? And things like that we will put in the follow-up email so that we don't, Bob will give us a list of resources and we will share that with everyone. But lots of people want to know about children. You can tell lots of people are at home with their children. And the question is, at what age should children begin to meditate? How do you teach transcendental meditation to children? And there have been some questions just about the technique itself, like what is it exactly? So maybe you could do a very quick, what's transcendent, what are the stages, the steps? And then what about children, particularly in this age of anxiety for children?
Okay, watch how short this is going to be. Transcendental meditation is not a mass meditation. It's not taught out of a book. It's not, it's you have your own teacher, you have your own mentor, you have your own coach. The first day of instruction is done one-to-one with the teacher. The next 3 days, you can have a choice of either doing it one-to-one or it can be taught through an app. But it's taught now over 4 consecutive days, about an hour, hour and a half a day over 4 consecutive days to learn it. This is not something that you finally get good at after 2 months. You've got it. There's a wonderful lifetime follow-up program at no additional fee. Transcendental Meditation is taught. It's a nonprofit organization. That's for kids from 10 years or 11 years and up. Children from about the age of 4 to 10 learn to meditate. That they don't sit to meditate. And by the way, when you do TM, you're just sitting comfortably in a chair with the eyes closed. It's not sitting in a particular posture with your back erect and all that, just comfortable. Children from about the age of 4 to 10 or 11, they get what's called a word of wisdom. It's a mantra, but they don't do it sitting with their eyes closed. They can draw, they can go for walks. They do that for about 5 minutes in the morning and the afternoon, before classes, at home or wherever, and afterwards. It has a very resonant quality for them. And then when they're 10 or 11, then they learn the sitting technique. That was pretty good.
That was excellent. That was excellent. I think that, and would you say transcendental meditation, I know that is your field particularly, but would you say that is the most effective for children?
I would say that there are breathing techniques. There's many, many different approaches still within those 3 areas. Our experience in teaching this, because we have a lot of programs where we do it in schools. It's called quiet time, where the kids' school begins and ends each day actually in class with 10 minutes of quiet time. And during that time, a child could read quietly, they could nap, they're at their desk, or they could do TM, and about 90% of the kids want to do TM. It's very easy for them to do. It's not frustrating. A lot of techniques that involve focus or concentration, very difficult for them. I can't pass a judgment on that other than saying that our experience is that it's very helpful. But I will add this one point. Again, going back to what I said before, a lot of children, a lot of parents, they learn themselves. It's wonderful when whole families learn. That's just an amazing thing. Then family learns, the child starts the day with 10 minutes of meditation. They don't do 20 minutes. And then they have it, and they have that lowered cortisol and a clear thinking mind. Now it's 1 in the afternoon or 2 in the afternoon, and there's a test coming up and they're anxious. Well, great. There's some lovely mindfulness breathing techniques that they could do for a minute that no one even has to know they're doing. It's not some fancy pranayama, it's just some simple breathing that can help them at that moment. So I think for this meditation, TM is the easiest. In addition, there are other things they can do at other times.
You mentioned breath work, breathing, and that's a huge topic that's come up on a number of our calls and a number of topics in unusual ways. Can you talk a little bit more about the connection to that, and also the distinction between mindfulness and meditation? I think there's a tremendous confusion about that as well.
So the beauty of breath, well, first of all, the brain is fed by oxygen. Oxygen is food for the brain. Oxygen calms the brain. when we're anxious and we sometimes hyperventilate through our mouth like that, where's the oxygen going? Into our lungs. Fine, it's bringing oxygen, but it's not going up into the brain. Breathing techniques always include some element of breathing through the nostrils up into the, fill up your lungs, up into the brain, hold it for a bit of time, and then out either through the nostrils or through the mouth. Exhale. What you're doing when you do that is you're actually feeding the brain, but specifically calming the amygdala. And it can be done just a minute or two. It's very powerful. The long-term effects are not known, but helping in that moment is very significant. The difference between transcendental meditation and mindfulness, again, mindfulness is, it's a cognitive process. It's a big word, but it just means, how do I address my thoughts, my moods, my feelings? How do I address those waves? How do I live in the present moment? How do I learn to dispassionately observe, oh, I'm sitting in meditation and now I'm having a thought coming up that's creating some anxiety. Well, why is it creating anxiety? I acknowledge it there, and then I let it move on, and then I come back to my breath, and then I notice another thought or something, and I acknowledge it, and I put it over in that category. That's a cognitive process, and that's where that theta brainwaves. Now, you have to understand, there's a lot more to it. I'm summarizing it. I have great respect for evidence-based approaches. So, but what transcendental meditation does completely different. Transcendental meditation makes use of, and I'll do this quickly, but how do we get in TM? How do we get from here to this quiet, silent area of the mind? How do I transcend? That just means go deep. How do I go from this to this? And the key word here, completely without effort. No effort. I'm going to give you an example. You're sitting in your office at home or somewhere doing some boring accounting or paperwork or something on your computer. And then suddenly in the other room, some of the most beautiful music, extraordinary music you've ever heard in your life comes on. Where's your attention go? Whoa, turn that up. Or one other example, you have two books you have to read. One never should have been published. You can't read a word. The other, phenomenal. Hours go by. What is that? Your attention drawn to that music in the other room without effort, your attention effortlessly absorbed in the book. Here's the key to TM. Given the opportunity, the mind will always be drawn to something more satisfying, beautiful, pleasurable, delicious, fragrant, always, innocently, given the opportunity. And inside, the quiet level of the mind, nice place. Hypothetically, but nice place. And all we have to do with transcendental meditation is give the attention of the mind in inward direction. Like you teach a child how to dive, you say, take the inward, take the correct angle, then gravity takes over. Or you're gripping a tennis ball and you want the tennis ball to be on the ground, you just loosen the grip and the ball falls. The mind seeks happiness inside wonderful, nice place. Give the attention of the mind in inward direction through the use of a mantra, which is a word or a sound that has no meaning, and without any effort whatsoever. Your active, agitated, heated, irritated mind just has a chance to go from these hot levels to these cooler, calmer levels. And when that happens, your body gets deep rest. So in TM, we don't resist thoughts. Thoughts are fine. We're bringing everything to that quieter level.
Before I ask you, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about the apps and technology as it relates to meditation and mindfulness. In all the work that you have done worldwide over the years with the military and with universities and students and all kinds of programs, have you worked with medical doctors, and people are interested in knowing why this is not sort of prescribed more in terms of medical science? Why when you're meeting with your doctor doesn't he say, well, if you really want to manage stress, you ought to meditate?
Well, it's happening more, but it's interesting you bring this up because the David Lynch Foundation, as was pointed out at the beginning, we've spent the last 15 years providing scholarships for at-risk populations: inner city school kids, veterans, women survivors of domestic violence, youth and adults who are battling substance use disorder, guards and inmates behind prison walls. Both of them are under enormous stress. We've been providing scholarships for free for them to learn. What we started in April, which is taking off faster than anything, is something called Heal the Healers, which is we're now bringing the meditation to doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers who are on the front lines battling this COVID crisis. And if you're aware of this, they're suffering from the same types of PTS. I don't like to say PTSD, post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a little diminishing to the veteran or someone, because disorder seems to imply it's something from inside her or him, but actually it's something that happened to them. So just post-traumatic stress, they're suffering from post-traumatic stress, and nothing is working. So we are now doing pilot studies in 40 different hospitals in the US, offering it as a wellness package to doctors and nurses and custodial staff, and major trials are underway at a number of other universities and medical schools. The idea here is to do the research so that transcendental meditation becomes available and is covered by employee assistance programs in all these hospitals. So yes, this is how they find out about it, by doing it themselves. So we're really focused on that. And the last thing I wanted to say is what can we do about it? Actually, large trials, phase 3 clinical trials, are starting on post-traumatic stress with veterans, soon on high blood pressure, and on anxiety. Within a few years, that data will help be leveraged so that you'll be able to go to a doctor, and just as the doctor can write a prescription for Prozac or something for Lyme disease, and you get it covered by your insurance company, time will come soon that you'll be able to get a prescription to learn transcendental meditation, and I feel other evidence-based integrative approaches, because it has to change. It has to change. And I think within a few years, it'll be a different ballgame.
Well, let's hope so, because that, there are a lot of things that we've talked about, why don't doctors prescribe a walk in nature, or other things that are proven, if science,
I love the term forest bathing.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's been around a long time, and that's
absolutely
yeah. In different parts of the world. Yep.
Lowers cortisol better than a drug. It increases serotonin, increases dopamine, all these things, oxytocin. But it's happening soon. It's happening soon.
Bob, what about the corporate world? You're also now working with big companies. I mean, it always seems like if you're going to move the needle on these things, you've got to get to the people who, move the market. So what are you doing in that particular world to bring TM to business?
It's the same thing. You all know this. I mean, how integrative approaches, how healthy approaches are making their way into the mainstream. You know that. And transcendental meditation is just going along with that whole flow, that whole push. I think what's going to happen, though, and I know we sometimes wish it didn't require research, but for insurance companies to want to cover, they're going to start looking increasingly, okay, here's 15 different approaches that say that this is going to, Headspace reduces anxiety, and TM reduces anxiety, and this reduces it. Okay, well, what does the data show, and how large was the study, and was it a randomized controlled trial, and was done, did they follow it for not just 10 days or 3 weeks, but for months or a year? The study we're doing with veterans, it's in 9 VA hospitals, and it's over a year. It's the largest study ever done on meditation in veterans. And in the old days, we would have thought, well, that's veterans, they're the traumatized ones, but it's coming to us. So it's also, to answer your question, in companies, they love the data on TM. They love the hard data on TM. So there's much more interest in it. Not all, some of them are very, very slow. You guys see it in your own world. It's often driven by the person who's at the top, like, Susie and Nancy at the top, and you guys are open to this. And some people are open and some people aren't, but it's just a matter of time.
Susie, do you want to ask a question before we get to technology?
Yes, thank you. Bob, can you talk about the practical, cost
Yeah.
And this, you know, I learned, because I didn't know, where do I go if I want to learn TM? And you mentioned that there's it's possible to learn online, which would be new, because at the time when I took it, that was not an option. So maybe just those practical pieces
Sure.
would be helpful.
So you'll get this on your thing, but tm.org is a website you can go to, and you can find out where the TM center is in your area. And you can contact the TM teacher. You can tell them that, you know, you talked to Bob, you heard Bob Roth talk. I know them, and you heard this introductory talk, and you want to find out more information. Many of the TM centers are open. Some of them where there's a real pandemic, they're being, I mean, really a spike, they're being very cautious. Transcendental meditation used to be taught in 4 in-person sessions. Now it's just 1. So 1 in-person, and then 3 can be done remote. It's an interesting thing. We've tried doing that initial instruction of how you turn the attention of your mind within, and with a mantra that the teacher gives you that just effortlessly allows everything to deepen. And it hasn't worked. I guess it's like you can't raise your child digitally. You know, you sort of need to spend some time face-to-face with your child. So that first day seems to be required. That could, on the one hand, be a limiting factor, but on the other hand, we don't want to water this down. We're just training more teachers. And cost, it's a nonprofit organization, and the cost is based on income. It's tiered based on income. So some people who are comfortable can pay, I think, $960 for a lifetime. That's a lot. There's no additional lifetime. It can go down to $300 and some for people who are hurting. Kids are around that amount. And for people who have no money whatsoever, then the David Lynch Foundation, as I said, we've given it to 1 million people for free. But you should know that when you do give whatever amount you give, part of that goes to helping kids, veterans, these people learn to meditate for free. So it's a good organization, nonprofit, and so it's the whole idea is a rising tide should lift all boats. So we want to be sure that the people who are really struggling financially and emotionally can learn to meditate as well. Did that
Thanks,
answer?
Bob. And my last question, and then back to you, Nancy, because I'm very anxious to hear about the technology also. Can you talk a little bit about international? You know, here in the US, that's one thing, but what about in Europe and Asia?
120
and
countries. It's in 120 countries, nonprofit TM organizations. And you can go to tm.org there, and you'll be able to find location in your country. Otherwise, you can, on tm.org, there's an email. You can just email and ask, or an 800 number, and ask where it would be. But the same teaching, same highly qualified. One of the things that I like about the meditation is high level of certification for the teachers. This is, you know, it's a 5-month, some of in residence, postgraduate level training to learn how to teach the meditation, and not only teach the meditation, but again, you have this lifetime of follow-up where TM isn't just to get rid of stress. There's growth. There's waking up of the amazing creative networks in the brain. There's this whole notion of self-realization. There's this whole notion of, you know, enlightenment, all these different things, science-based, but you have that support for your whole life. Like I am forever going to be with both you and with Nancy and you, Susie, and the people that I taught or love. You have support for your whole life. Yes, Susie?
Are there some countries that are more into transcendental meditation than other countries?
I think the countries where obviously, so interesting, we have a lot of interest from people in places like Iran, but we can't teach there. So some places, for political reasons, we can't teach, but it's all over the world. Stress is the pandemic. Trauma is the pandemic. That's hitting everybody. And long after if they find a vaccine, or when they do, long after that, the trauma and stress from this whole thing is going to be, that's the shakedown. But I think just anywhere where people are not, they're stressed, they're anxious. They don't want to just say, okay, I'm going to take this pill for hypertension. I'm going to take this pill to go to sleep. I'm going to take this pill so I can poop. I'm going to take this pill. You know, it's just a cocktail. They want something, and they're doing something from the neck down. And they say, all right, I'm going to add this to this very important tool to my toolbox.
Bob, with the time that we have left, there are a couple of things. You mentioned the apps, and this is obviously a huge business. This is enormous. And it's an interesting intersection because many people believe that technology is sort of, you know, interferes with any kind of mindfulness or meditation or calm that we might want to feel. But then there is Headspace and Calm and eMindful and Buddhify and everything else. What's your feeling about technology and meditation? And, you know, what can we learn from these apps, and what do you think? I'm not going to ask you to, you know, rate them, but I just want to know what you think about technology and meditation, that marriage.
Not going anywhere. It's, you know, we have to be realistic. It's here. I was looking at someone sent me this quote from someone back in 1871, where they were bemoaning the stress of the world because of, or something like that, because of Western Union and the stopwatch. I mean, so there's always stress. Now this is much worse. The lovely thing about transcendental meditation, again, is it's so easy to do. So you don't have to fight your thoughts. You're not battling, you're not trying to stop all the waves on the surface of the ocean. You're just dipping underneath the waves to that calm that already exists. And you're doing it in an effortless way because your mind already is drawn to something more satisfying. You're just learning from a teacher how to set up the condition to do that.
But what about those apps and what they offer?
I think that they're good gateways. All right, I'll be because I'm very transparent. I just read an article that said with Headspace, and I've tried it, and I think it's a good gateway for people, good entry. If that's what they want to do, more power to you. Try it. But they said one of the problems with Headspace is its evaluation is going through the roof, all this stuff, marketing, and yet the research is not keeping up with the claims. That when you look at it, and that's what I was saying earlier in a more polite way, is when you scratch just a little bit, then it's not keeping up with the demand. We were doing a program with a hospital here in New York City, and they'd been doing some apps, and they said, no, we need something deeper. People want a deeper experience. They want to deepen, just like you want to deepen a relationship, you want to deepen your meditation experience. And the woman said, it's too much like a Band-Aid. The problems that we're dealing with, it's not just listening to some music or or raindrops or someone telling me, you know, guiding me someplace. They need something more substantive. And so my concern is some people do these apps and they think, I tried it, I didn't like it, I can't meditate. And then they just go back to self-medicating or back to their pharmaceutical approach. And I would say if you've tried a meditation and it hasn't worked, there are other types, and give it a try because the stakes are very high.
Yeah, and it does seem that the apps do kind of democratize this and make it very accessible, at least, as you say, as a gateway. I mean, why not be doing these things if something works?
I'm completely, just people need to know that the entry level is that, and some people are very happy with it. That's great. But I come from, and believe me, if there were techniques, I mean, I do TM, but if there was something that was, I'm interested in science, I'm interested in producing the results. I'm not just like hawking my approach. I want to see the data. And so, yes, and as a matter of fact, I think ultimately the democratization of meditation is when it is covered by our healthcare system and everyone has access to it. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I'm sure Headspace and others are too.
Yeah. I also just want to mention that the David Lynch Foundation is a nonprofit. Bob does a tremendous, this organization does a tremendous amount of work at no cost to people around the world who are in need. So, you know, it's really quite incredible. Go ahead.
We just did a study on 2,000 inner city school kids, and it was a randomized control trial. The results will be announced soon. And it was to study, you know, you see all the violence that's going on in Chicago and Detroit, everywhere. Well, the study was not just, meditation helps with grades, but they wanted to see if it would reduce arrests for violent crime. because nothing can reduce arrest from violent crime. That is an impulsivity, that is a fight or flight in the brain from childhood. And the reason why you want to reduce arrest is because then you are reducing a 14-year-old kid gets arrested for a violent crime, his life is over. It's a school to prison pipeline, or 19-year-old kid. And when they do interventions, if it can reduce those arrests by 10, 15%, they're happy. Randomized control trial, 2 years, 2,000 kids, 70% reduction in arrests for violent crime. They've never seen anything like that. We're now going to replicate that from 2,000 kids to 10,000 kids. And then there's something called Title I funding from the government, which goes to children who are attending schools at or below the poverty level, 10 million children traumatized. And the meditation could then be made available to them as part of, covered. So
that is incredible work. And I just, on behalf of everyone, want to thank you for doing it. I know it is, it's just amazing what you do and what the organization does. I'm going to ask you 2 quick last questions. One is, what keeps you up at night, assuming something does? And what are you optimistic about? Are you optimistic about anything in the world these days? And could you share those feelings with us?
What keeps me up at night is children. Really, 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 really worried about our next generation, afraid of losing a generation. This is brutal, but the number 2 cause of death among teenagers is suicide. And that's just unacceptable. And we know that this stuff starts at an early age. So trying to figure ways that we can demystify meditation so we can answer these nonsense questions and show that this is something, do the research so this can become available as a tool for children to grow and manage stress. That's what really does. I really, really worry about next generation. Not like, oh, they're dancing like Elvis Presley. I'm talking about serious issues of trauma and toxic stress. What I'm hopeful about is human nature to just look how fast you're growing. People are not listening to the quote unquote experts. They're finding for themselves. They're looking for ways to become healthier, even if it's not taught in the textbooks, or it's not as mainstream as we'd like it to be. The quest for everyone to find their own path. And I think that's what's going to lead us through this dark time. It's human spirit, human nature to find truth.
A faith in human nature. That's an absolutely perfect way to end this call.